Hello travelers, Boardman21 here, and today we got an update for some changes coming to the Necromancer. Now it comes as no surprise that a lot of people have given a lot of feedback on the Necromancer. Some people hate that some of the minions automatically, die. The decay of health on both Wraith, Abomination, things like that have been discussed for a really long time, and lots of people hate the fact that these minions just disappear and you're constantly having to do upkeep to keep them going. It's not a very laid back sort of playstyle, which is what's mentioned inside of this post. And how cool is it that we now get to see some of the changes that are coming based on that feedback? That's right, you played, you didn't like it, maybe you did like it, you gave feedback on things you'd like changed. Either way, they listened, and now they're giving you those changes coming in the next patch. So here's what we got so far. In this forum post, which I will have linked in the description below so you can go through and read it at your own pace if you don't want to follow along, we have 8.3 Necromancer updates. Going into 8.3, Necromancer has several issues, mostly centering around its class-specific skills: Dreadshade, Summon Wraith, and Assemble Abomination. All of these skills are receiving changes to their base functionality and moderate changes to their trees. All three trees will see changes somewhat. Not every node, but it sounds like there will be changes overall to how the skill works and the nodes inside of the skill. These are intended to curtail overpowered or problematic abilities, provide more opportunities for permanent minion playstyles, and add more synergy with the newest Acolyte minion, Volatile Zombie. So first off, we love Volatile Zombie. I have not seen anybody complain about it. Maybe that it's a little too OP, maybe it gives too much ward, but overall, most people through roughly enjoy Volatile Zombie, so it's really cool to see these other skills, a couple of which people really struggle with, especially Assemble Abomination, to be more in line with something that we'd like and to synergize with a skill we already know that we like. Temporary minions. There are specific issues that we're solving for each skill, but first we want to address a more systematic problem that disappoints a lot of Necromancer players, and that is the fact that all Necromancer specific skills are either temporary minions or Dreadshade. So what they mean by this is not all builds that people play with Necromancers is temporary minions or using Dreadshade. It's that the specific class specific, the skills you only get as a Necromancer are Assemble Abomination or Summon Wraith, which both are decaying minions that are not permanent, or it's Dreadshade. That's the third skill that's directly only tied to the Necromancer, and Dreadshade is something that you constantly have to cast. Now, it does last for 20 seconds, but you probably want it on multiple minions, so you're either going to be casting it many times over because that minion's either going to die from it, or you need it on multiple minions to give them the buffs, or you're going to have it on like a 6-second cooldown in which you'll auto-cast it, and you'll just have it constantly going off every 6 seconds. Either way, they're all temporary, and as we continue here, which is not only a temporary buff that has to be repeated, recast to maintain, but also drains the minions it's attached to, effectively making them temporary. So even if you're not using just the class-specific minions, which Assemble Abomination and the Wraiths automatically decay, if you have Summon Skeleton Mages or the Skeletons, Death Knights, Rogues, whatever it is you're using, and you put Dreadshade on them, they're now going to decay and die from that. So it's a very temporary Necromancer playstyle, and they're looking to fix that, which is awesome. I do like the playstyle where you're constantly having to do things, but I would rather those things not be just resummoning the same minions. I would like it being skills that provide temporary buffs, or for it to be an active playstyle in which I need to dodge things or block things or do something with my character other than just resummon over and over and over again. One of our goals with the Necromancer was to allow for more active summoner playstyles, and we still maintain that as a goal, but a lot of people prefer a more laid-back playstyle where they just summon their minions and then relax. Necromancer currently doesn't really offer anything to this playstyle beyond the skills available to all Acolyte Masteries. Many of you have played like the Ice Range minions where you have the mages and you have the archers. It's a very laid-back one because you really don't have to do very much with it. A lot of people like that. You still have Dreadshade in that. You still have to resummon when Dreadshade kills something, but it's a much more laid-back kind of playstyle where you don't have to like constantly be in it and in it. It just kind of goes along with you, and you can just kind of be laid back and go through battle. As you've seen, this is one that's been played a lot by Mike on the dev streams, and you can tell he's a lot more laid back. It allows for him to like read questions and do things while his minions kill things, and he can keep going. And for some people, that's just a really good build because you don't have to pay attention to every little aspect. You know, if you're a multitasker, there's other things that you're focusing on, or maybe just focusing on other minions by yourself. It's just something where you don't have to constantly look up in the top left corner, see how many minions are alive, and see if it's time to resummon them. To address this, we're adding options in the tree for all 3 Necromancer specific skills to allow them to become permanent. That's right, you heard it. There will be a permanent version of Assemble Abomination. Or in the case of Dreadshade, require far less frequent reapplication, and it will no longer drain the minions it's attached to. Now, they have some sample notes here, so you will see that these are not going to be the default function of these skills, but you can spec into them. So below you'll see we have Twin Spirits. This is in the Raise tree. Raise health no longer decays, but you are limited to only 2. I know what you're thinking. I'm thinking the same thing. 2? When we're so used to having 200? We'll have to see how much extra damage they're giving them for that, because having 2 permanent raise when you could have 100 of them up at all times, we'll have to see how that one plays out. Lone Watcher. Dreadshade no longer drains the health of the minion it's attached to and lasts substantially longer, but you are limited to just 1 active Dreadshade. Increases the health drain from this tree, instead increase damage taken by the minion that it's applied to. Now what's cool about this is typically you only really worry about having 1 Dreadshade active at a time anyways. Normally you have 1, you try and stay in it. Sometimes you have multiple. For me, I would usually have 2 or 3. I don't like applying that many out, but it has a 6-second cooldown. It lasts for 20 seconds. I like to put it on auto cast so it's laid back and I don't have to manually be looking where I'm going to cast it or trying to constantly get it. I just put it on auto cast and just let it go where it goes. It usually auto targets the nearest minion. What's cool about this is instead of doing it like that, because that killed minions really quick because you were applying it to someone or multiple stacks to something and it would poison them much quicker, now you can just have it on 1 minion and it doesn't kill them. Seems like a really big quality of life thing for the skill, and I can't wait to try it out. As we also know, and we'll probably get into below this, they are going to mention that a lot of the buffs, Dreadshade is a very powerful buffer, that's going to come down in overall power anyways. So having something like this where it's just active there for you, if you're actually using it as a skill, now that other things will be kind of balanced with it, it should be a lot funner to use. And by funner, I mean just kind of laid back, not so like, oh, is it up, where's it at, who's it on, are they dying, are they almost dead? Nah, you just get to put it on them, you know it's not killing them, and when the circle disappears, recast it. Alright, and then we have the Age of Undeath node. You can now only consume minions from the Summon Skeletons and the Summon Skeleton Mages skills to create the Abomination. However, the Abomination does not decay unless you also control 3 or more such minions. So what this means is, when you go to consume minions to make the Abomination, it will only consume minions that fall inside of those 2 skill trees, which means your archers, your death knights, your rogues, skeleton mages, all the different types of them, whether it be Priomancers or Cryomancers, doesn't matter. It will only consume those types, and then it will make the Abomination. And if you have 3 or less of those, it no longer decays health. So that means you can still have the Golem, you can still have Wraiths, you can still have other minions in there, but you can't have 3 or more skeletons or mages or all of them added together. You can't have 3 or more of them. So if you start like summoning them again to have them fight together, the Abomination will start decaying its health again. If you have 3 or more because you're just prepping them in order to make another Abomination, which you wouldn't have to do that anymore considering that the Abomination isn't losing health, but say it's just dying from hits, which in our heads we're just thinking that's not even possible, it has so much life. But if it was, once you start summoning them, it'll start decaying again as you prepare to make another one. As we continue down, let's see some changes to the Summon Wraith. Summon Raise has always been a difficult skill for us to balance. Combined with the various sources of additional raise across other skill and passive trees, you could end up with hundreds of them. That's never happened. Which would push a lot of mechanics over the edge and cause performance issues. Never happened. Especially in multiplayer. I haven't actually got to do that, but I could see it. Because of this, we made the decision to add a hard limit to the number of raids, greatly increasing their damage, and change the minions summoned by a lot of these incidental Wraith sources. So if you go down, we got a note here, it says the Covenant of Souls. I assume this is inside of the skill tree. It says you can control more Wraiths at once. This lets you increase it +1 with 2 points in the node. Now up above we saw that you could only have 2 of them, but they no longer decayed. I don't know what the default limit is. They don't tell us. Now, if we just went off the top, we would assume you could only have 2 total, and that meant they didn't decay. This would allow you to get up to 4 of them, but I don't know. It doesn't anywhere in this tell us the actual default number with no notes taken inside the skill tree where they would still decay health, what the limit would be, whether the limit is still an unlimitable amount. I assume it's not, because they said they've hard capped it. So not really sure, but we'll have to wait and see the rest of the skill tree to see exactly what it is that we have there. Another issue that has affected Wraiths for a long time is confusion over what counts as a Wraith and what scales with the Summon Wraith tree. Previously, there were things outside of the tree that were called Wraiths but didn't scale with it. Sometimes these even had the same name as types of Wraiths that could be summoned via the Summon Wraith tree and did scale with it. And what they're talking about is inside of both the Necromancer and inside of the Lich passive trees, you had things that you could get on minion kills or on your kills or when a minion dies that would allow or summon like a Blood Wreath or a Putrid Wreath, and those ones actually didn't use your skill tree, even though they had the same name. The nodes on the Necromancer and the Lich passive trees now summon Skeleton Vanguards rather than Putrid Wraiths. This change was also motivated by a desire to avoid the number of minions summoned by these nodes being unlimited. Blood Wraiths have been renamed to Blood Spectrals and can now no longer be summoned via the Summon Wraith tree. Because of this, there is no longer a way to summon anything called Wraith from outside of the Summon Wraith tree, and any minion referred to as a Wraith will scale with the Summon Wraith tree. So sounds like a lot of confusion will be cleared up there. On a related note, we have fixed the bug where Putrid Wraiths and Flame Wraiths decayed much more slowly than regular summoned Wraiths. I'm starting to get a little confused. I think that if you don't take the node that stops the decaying and limits you to 2, that they still decay, but it's still going to be hard capped somehow. Maybe. The loss of blood Wraiths in the Wraith tree does not mean a loss of blood synergy. Serrated Scythes have now been buffed, and there is a new node that increases the effectiveness and duration of bleed applied by Wraiths. So down below we got 2 more nodes. We got Serrated Scythes. Wraiths have a chance to cause enemies to bleed on hit, gives them bleed chance up to 100%. And then we have Sanguine Spirits. Bleed inflicted by Wraiths has increased effect and duration, and you can get 15% duration and bleed effect with them. That's pretty powerful with those two combined just for 1 point. As we go down, let's see some changes made to Dreadshade. In general, for Summoner Necromancers, Dreadshade is incredibly powerful, and its power is very generic. And that goes for more than just the Summoner Necromancers. Even if you're not a Summoner and you're doing like a Marrow Shards build or a Hungering Souls build or doing something where you're trying to do all the DPS yourself and not use minions, you are still going to throw out like a Golem just so you could get Dreadshade out there to buff yourself because you wanted that huge amount of attack speed, that huge amount of damage, and that huge amount of armor that you could get. Your survivability goes up, your DPS goes up, everything up. It's just everything generic is increased for sure. But that didn't go for just summoners. I mean, anyhow, no matter how you played the Necromancer, Dreadshade was best in slot, no doubt about it. There aren't really any builds that can forgo it because its damage multiplier is so high and it applies to all the damage of the minion or all allies around the minion, including yourself. Even for non-summoner Necromancer, it's an incredibly powerful option due to the Symbiotic Apparition node. Exactly, so I probably should just kept reading. In 8.3, we want to reduce its overall power and also make it more situational so that it isn't a must-have skill for every Necromancer. Not everyone playing a minion build enjoys repeatedly applying temporary buffs. Correct. And it means we have to balance all other minion skills around it. Because of that, its base functionality has been changed to grant plus 10 necrotic damage to spells and attacks and 50% increased necrotic damage. In most cases, this is much less powerful than the current 25% more damage it currently provides, which is multiplicative with all other modifiers. Its tree has received several changes in addition to the new nodes shown above. Many of the damage and attack cast speed related nodes in Dreadshade have been reduced in power, and the Marty Doom node now grants armor based on vitality rather than intelligence. Now that's really big because vitality can only come on 3 slots for your gear, which means there's going to be a much smaller amount of it that you can actually have, and vitality doesn't naturally stack like intelligence does for a Necromancer build that's obviously also building ward or something. Additionally, the very powerful taunt from the Egoism and the Deadlock nodes has been changed. The taunt from Deadlock can now only last 4 seconds, and Egoism adds an 18-second cooldown instead of 6 seconds. I actually kind of like that because even if I kept it on autocast, because the skill does last 20 seconds, this actually just means that I would be killing my minions slower. But then again, we also have to remember that we might not be actually hurting our minions anymore either. So we'll have to see. It looks like a quality of life thing for us. So the uptime on the taunt is now much more limited. This is not an isolated change, and other sources of taunt and acolyte and other classes have similarly been addressed for 8.3. We did hear that big taunt changes were coming. It doesn't sound like taunt itself is changing how it works. It sounds like just the sources of taunt are being reduced so you can't get 100% uptime of them. They're going to be a much shorter duration. However, the changes aren't all nerfs. The Doom brand aspect of the tree has been buffed, the part that we basically never use. Connections have been altered, and there are a few more new nodes. Let's take a look at a couple of them. We have Beyond Death. When a minion targeted by a Dreadshade dies, you have a chance to summon a volatile zombie from its corpse. Like they said above, they were going to add in some synergies between all the seals and the new skill volatile zombie, so this is cool. Vile Ghast. Dreadshade now increases poison damage instead of necrotic damage and converts added necrotic damage from the base skill, and this tree has a chance to poison on hit. So this will mean that your 50% necrotic damage you get will now be 50% increased poison damage, and then that base 10 necrotic that you were getting is now 1 to a 5 ratio for percentage for poison chance, so that 10 necrotic would become 50% poison chance on hit. So what's cool about this is now whatever minion you put it on, or all the minions that are affected by it, because that's the default that it would do, now get 50% poison chance and 50% more poison damage. So whatever minions are affected by that, if you have a lot of them, that is a huge poison boost for a poison build. That is a huge boost. One that I can guarantee you that I'll definitely be playing around with. Maybe the Plague Bearer staff will have a comeback. We'll have to find out. Then we scroll down, we got Assemble Abomination. On a more positive note, Assemble Abomination is receiving changes that should improve the quality of life and make it feel less clunky to build a powerful minion with it. There has been a lot of feedback that the nodes on the tree to increase the speed of absorption felt necessary to make the skill feel good to use. And this is true, at least in my opinion, that sometimes, especially if you're in battle, it feels really bad to have to sit there and summon for a long period of time because you're getting hit, you're dying. Now, there is the fact that you could play it safe, you know, you really pay attention, you time it right, you do it in between echoes, you do it in between your 5 waves in the arena. But that just feels really bad. If it's something you can't do in battle and you need it, it's something that's going to get you killed. But that it was hard to justify taking them when they meant that the Abomination would be so much less powerful due to missing out on nodes that increased in power. So if you guys remember, it took 5 points in the consumption speed to unlock the 1 point that you could spend to consume 2 at once. So you were essentially spending 6 points if you were to max out the consumption speed. 6 points is almost 33% of the points in the tree total. That's a lot of points, especially when the other points were going into slowing down the health decay, so that you could consume fast, make it last, so you wouldn't have to do it as much, as often, or for as long. It felt really bad to use half the points in the tree just to make the damn thing quickly and last a while. So definitely glad to see that they're changing that. In response, we're rolling out most of the effects that these nodes into the base skill and removing them from the tree. That sounds awesome. Can't wait to play with it. This means that more of your points when you're going inside of the tree, instead of like just speeding up the process or just giving it less decay of health, now get to be spent on more interesting effects, such as giving it like the new tail slam. If you guys have seen that, actually we will see that when we scroll down. I haven't got to that yet, but the new effects and getting into those special things like that you could do now, where you could, you know, consume a very specific type of minion to get a very specific effect to happen. Now that we can spend more points into that type of thing and build it the way we want, instead of what we have to do to just make it feel good to summon, is going to be great. One aspect of the Abomination that has been too powerful in the past is the node that increases its threat generated. We all know that taunt and threat in the game are really powerful right now. Both this node and the one that's similar to it on the Bone Golem have had their values reduced. Though, the Reflect on the Abomination node has seen a slight increase to compensate, so that's good. We do like Reflect builds, glad to see they're giving it a slight buff on the Abomination. He is one of the minions I'd love to say can actually take a hit, so having Reflect on him makes sense. The Abomination tree has also been shifted around a bit with different connections and power shifted to different nodes. In addition to this, 2 new nodes have been added. One was shown above, and the other gives it a new skill when it absorbs a volatile zombie, as we'll see when we scroll down here, called Bloated Corpse. If a volatile zombie is consumed, your Abomination gains an explosive tail slam, as I was mentioning just a little bit ago. And here's a short clip of it. You can see it looks just like the Abomination in the fight when you're in the timeline. He does the tail slam, 2 fire booms go, really cool. Minion Scaling. In general, minions have been more powerful to level with than use in endgame, and this is true. And the change to Dreadshade will probably exacerbate this. So we've made a couple of changes, one very specific and one very general. The specific change is that the Tyrant's Legion node on the Necromancer passive tree is being changed. It now grants a maximum of +1 skeleton instead of granting +1 skeleton per point. So there was a node up there that you could put up to 2 points in it, and it would give you +1 skeleton for each point that you put in there. It would also increase the skeleton damage and reduce their health. No longer increases the skeleton damage or reduces the skeleton health. Now also grants skeletons 4% physical and poison penetration per point. This goes along nicely with the new Dreadshade, because if you go poison, you can now get poison penetration. And then of course the physical penetration, because that's their normal form of damage. That's a great synergy there. And you can now have 5 points allocated instead of the 2. So you can only get 1 added skeleton from this method instead of 2. But you're now giving them up to 20% physical and poison penetration. You're also no longer reducing their life or giving them increased damage though. Summon skeletons in particular tend to drop off late game. And when you read that, that's the normal skeletons. We know about the ice range minion build where it does great in endgame and destroys things. We're not talking about the archers, we're not talking about the mages. We're talking about the normal baseline just skeletons. And granting them multiplicative damage bonus via penetration will hopefully give summon skeleton oriented necromancer builds a way to keep up. Personally, I don't really feel like just giving them 20% physical penetration is really going to help melee skeletons. I just really don't. The melee version of minions right now just lags really far behind ranged because it's ranged. The fact that they don't have to, the whole movement of minions is questionable, and I think that's the biggest problem. I don't really like seeing super fast play with melee minions, but honestly, the wolves for the companion, or the companion wolves for the Beastmaster is one of my favorite ones for melee, because they can like leap in and they're super quick and they just get into the battle, they kill things, boom, it's over. So while I do think the 20% penetration will help, I don't think it's going to make or break them. I think that it's going to give them a little bit of help, but they're still going to feel really bad because they're melee and they're just kind of, they're not as good as the range. So don't feel as good. I think they need to have a way to close up on a target or have some mid-range like a Spellblade or something, but we'll have to wait and see. Maybe just giving them AoE would make them feel better. I don't know. This has less of an effect on skeleton archers using fire and ice arrow, but these are already more powerful than the other types of skeletons, as we know. Minion Power. The more generic change we're making to Minion Scaling is to Minion Power. Minion Power is a mechanic we use to make minions stay more relevant in the endgame. Each 1% minion power grants them 1% more damage and 1% less damage taken. Both effects are multiplicative with other modifiers. Currently, all minions gain 0.5% minion power per character level starting at character level 21 for a total of 40% by character level 100. In 8.3, this is being changed to 0.6% per character level starting at character level 26. For a total of 45% by character level 100. This means that from level 51 onwards, minions will be more powerful on and at level 100 when they deal around 4% more damage and take around 8% less damage. This is a very, very slight buff, and it starts a little later in the game. 51 is about where you finish the campaign, so you're going to start to feel it the moment you hit the Monolith of Fate, but that is endgame, or I should say that's actually probably going to change since we're getting Chapter 9. You might actually be higher level by the time you finish the campaign now. But either way, Chapter 9, start of the Monolith of Fate, endgame, is where you're going to feel that little bit of boost start to take over, and it's not till, higher level where you're actually only getting that 4% more damage and they take 8% less damage. For me, that's okay. That small buff, I honestly don't even think they need that buff. I could see some of the minions needing it, not all of them. There are minion builds that do great in endgame. So having a little buff like that won't exaggerate any problems. I don't think any builds will become OP, but it will help some other builds feel good in endgame, so I like it. Alright, overall for this entire update, I really like what I see from mostly on the Assemble Abomination. I've been asking for it for a long time. Many of you have come to me and asked my opinion of Assemble Abomination. Many of you have asked for my help on trying to build one of them that feels good to use, and almost all of you complained about the consumption of it because it's just so clunky in battle. Just to try and do it, it just sucks every few minutes to have to redo it, and I'm glad to see that there are going to be ways around that now. So we'll have to play around with that a bit when 8.3 comes out, but I do look forward and hope to see lots of more players playing with Assemble Abomination in patch 8.3 and beyond. Alright, that's going to be it for me. What are your thoughts on all these updates? What are you most excited for? Let me know in the comments below, and we can discuss it. Alright, as always, stay safe, travelers, and have a good day.